be missing one or two board members, but we're going to go ahead and it's 7:31, so we're going to go ahead and get started. FairTV?
Yeah, we're good. I just started the recording.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton. It's January 9th, 2024. Happy New Year, and welcome to the first regular meeting of the Board of Finance for 2024. I'll call the meeting to order and ask that we please stand. And if you're on WebEx, please unmute yourselves. And while Mr. Mottola leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, to the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us on the WebEx tonight, you are muted and will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. Public comment pertinent to items 3, 4, and 7 is welcome and will be called before those items are heard. If you're on the WebEx and wish to provide public comment, please include your name and address in the chat box now or at any time prior to the items being called. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at bof@fairfieldct.org. If you do so, please remember to include your name and address for the record as you would with live comment. So the agenda for tonight's meeting will include several voting items, including an additional appropriation and transfer relating to costs for construction and remediation for Penfield's Pavilion, as well as some additional costs for the Duck Farm Road Bridge. We also have a presentation from the town's Economic Development Director and from the town engineer for the Rooster River project. Those last two items are on the agenda at the request of the board to allow us to spend a little more time focusing on these areas outside of the budget hearings and the capital project update, both of which will occur over the next couple months. So with that, I'm going to move to item 3. And actually, let me just change my layout to hide people without video so I could see everyone better. So item 3, to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen entitled a resolution appropriating an additional $1,429,950 for costs related to the construction, remediation, and addressing the notices of violation at Penfield's Pavilion. The full resolution for this item is included in the backup materials. It was previously approved by the Board of Selectmen and also requires approval from the RTM. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Testani, seconded by Mr. Stark. Okay, we can take public comment, if any, for this item at this point, as well as anything for item 4, which is a financial transfer associated with this same appropriation for Penfield Pavilion. I don't see anybody in the chat. Is there anyone there at in the Fire Training Center who wants to provide public comment?
Well, I think so.
Pardon me? No?
Doesn't look like it, Lori.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, we'll move to the discussion. So backup materials for this item are posted online, and the relevant materials begin on page 1, which is the full resolution. Some financial analysis is on pages 2 through 5, and a presentation on flooding from Race Coastal Engineering that begins on page 6. The first selectman is here, along with several other speakers to take us through the materials tonight. So I will turn this over to First Selectman Gerber just to kick us off. And then if you'd like to introduce any other speakers, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm going to just briefly go through where we are and who is here tonight to discuss where we are as well. So It's been known for years that FEMA's notice of violation required the town to take the beach elevation under and around Penfield from 11 feet approximately to the natural grade, which is deemed to be approximately 8 feet. Taking the beach elevation down to 8 feet would expose the pavilion's horizontal grade beam foundation, which is sitting currently at about elevation 11 feet. It was determined by FEMA that during a big storm, these beams could become an obstruction to storm surge and could topple the pavilion. FEMA's NOV, notice of violation, required the town to remove these horizontal grade beams from being an obstruction. At the same time, the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP, required the town to remove contaminated fill from under and around the pavilion. The town did many tests by taking core samples and found 8 hot spots that contained materials like PCBs that had to be disposed of in specialized facilities. The one the town is shipping this material to is in Michigan. Ultimately, it was decided to remediate the 8 hotspots first before starting construction on the foundation. Because they didn't want the construction teams on site while this more hazardous material was being dug up and removed. A significant portion of the rest of the fill, besides those found in the hotspots, is Connecticut regulated waste that must be disposed of, but there are more options that cost less. This fill will be removed during construction, and the cost of removing that fill is included in Bismarck Construction's bids. The town developed a plan to dig underneath Penfield, build a new horizontal grade beam foundation several feet lower, then cut away and dispose of the old horizontal grade beams. A few months ago, Race Coastal Engineering was asked to check the load-bearing calculations underpinning the horizontal grade beam design. Race found that there was too high a risk the beams would snap during a storm. In other words, the plan design was faulty, as well as the design of the building currently in place. The engineering team went back to the drawing board and developed a new design using helical piles. So Devin Santa, president of Race Coastal Engineering, is here, and he can answer questions about the design and the design change. But I'm going to continue on. It's got a little bit more to read. At the end of September, the town, through its construction manager, Bismarck Construction, received subcontractor bids for all the work required to resolve FEMA and DEEP's requirements, including constructing a new foundation, returning the elevation under the building to the natural grade, and remediate the contaminated fill. The total cost of the project increased by $809,476 as a result. The town, and this time this would be me and Eli Gazal, thought it prudent to add an owner's contingency of 5% of the revised total estimated cost, amounting to $620,474. The total increase we are requesting tonight is $1,429,950. The amount originally approved in March, including the coastal flood study of $11.6 million, will be increased to $13,029,950 if this is approved. Prior to this increase, the substantial improvement calculation cost categories and cost breakdown shown to FEMA by the previous administration had $2.4 million of costs counting as substantial improvement. The threshold for substantial improvement calculated and presented to FEMA was approximately $3.6 million. The final GMP bid numbers increased the substantial improvement number by $300,000 approximately to $2.7 million. This $0.3 million goes towards the cost of helical piles, concrete, and metals. Apparently, FEMA doesn't normally confirm calculations in writing, but it just so happens a resident emailed her concerns about the calculation to a senior FEMA employee, and she replied, that there is no indication the costs associated with bringing the structure into compliance will exceed the established threshold. Greg Rauchi from Bismarck Construction is on the line, and he's here. He can answer questions about construction and about the costs. Regarding timing, the plan when I came into office was to start construction at the end of January. The plan today is to start construction at the end of January. There's been no pause. As was explained to me, the facilities accepting hazardous materials have quotas, and those quotas, because of those quotas, we had nowhere to take the hazardous material from the last remaining hotspot in December. The plan when I came into office was to take care of this remaining hotspot in January, and that is still the plan. However, I was not willing to sacrifice coastal resiliency for the whole town in order to preserve a pavilion. The prior administration had some years to do a flood study. That flood study was authorized in March 2023, and we received the results of that study that were most important to me, at least, just 2 weeks ago. In my opinion, the most part of the study is the 10-year storm. And I think we should start this conversation by having Devin Santa present his initial work on the 10-year storm. He's currently working on the 25 and 50-year storm scenarios as well. But today, and again, this is to me the most important thing because this is most relevant to residents that live up and down the beach and in the beach area. So when he is finished or during and when he's done with his presentation, we can talk about natural ways to bring the beach resiliency back where it is today at 11-foot elevation. So I would like to turn it over to Devin, if that's all right. Devin, are you?
Yeah, that's good. Good by me.
Okay.
Thank you, Devin. Should we, so I'm assuming we should follow along the presentation that was posted with the materials?
Yeah, I suppose I could, maybe, I don't know if I could share my screen and then go through that way, if
You
that's
should be able
easier.
to share your screen. So do you have any instructions for Devin?
Yeah, if you can do that easily, that's fine. Otherwise, I would just point, and also, you know, for the public, so this presentation begins on page 6 of the backup materials, just in case. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay, does that work?
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, are we waiting until the end of Devin's presentation to ask questions? Can we ask questions now? What are we,
yeah, so-
how are we handling this agenda?
So, Mr. Testani, what I'd like to do is give the administration a chance to go through their presentation, and then we can ask questions. Although, to your point, I think getting through the flood study would be kind of a natural break in the conversation. So maybe we can get through this piece of it, and then we can take a break for questions on anything related to the flood study or anything the first selectman said. And then once we get through that, we can address any questions on financial matters or the resolution, if that works for everyone. Okay. Devin, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. My name's Devin Santa, President and Principal Race Coastal Engineering based out of Stratford. I'm also a Fairfield resident. I've been working with the town for a number of years. And we have worked with the town looking at the coastal engineering aspects associated with Penfield Pavilion post the construction. So we've been tasked with looking at the waterfront from a flooding perspective, and both in the Penfield site as well as the overall town waterfront. And I'll talk a little bit about both here. And one of the things, I know this is a finance committee meeting, and my presentation is not very financial. It's kind of technical in the coastal engineering sense, but I believe that's what First Selectman wants. So I'm going to go with that vein. But so I'm going to give a little background on how we go through this design and what the flooding sources we're seeing in the town are. So when we look at a structure or facility for design, or look at the shoreline for resiliency aspects, we look at basically a synthetic storm or a statistical storm event. And these are based on set periods of recurrence. The common one, most commonly known, probably is the 100-year storm. And that's the one that's commonly referenced in the building code. That's used for structural design, but when we're designing soft structures, beaches or dunes or living shorelines, we may look at more frequent recurrence intervals, 10, 25, or 50 year for a design basis. Going through the design basis, there's a number of components to any particular synthetic storm. There's wind, there's water level, and then there's wind directionality, all tied together with timing of tides. By common engineering practice and accepted by practice by FEMA, what was commonly done in the case of a 100-year storm is you're stacking up 100-year wind with 100-year water levels with a worst case wind direction to generate maximum waves and flooding. That's what we've done. We've done that for the town on a 100-year basis, and we've also done it for the town on a 10-year basis. And in process right now is a 25 and 50-year basis.
Mom just texted, "Hi there." She texted Claire and I, "Hi there. You two set for a blue tomorrow."
So moving along here, this is a image of the FEMA flood insurance rate map for the
Can
town.
everyone, can everyone please mute themselves other than the speaker? Thank you.
This is a image of the flood insurance rate map for the town of Fairfield, and the colors are a little hard to see. I don't know if I can mouse over it. Mouse is hard to see, but everything in blue is in a special flood hazard area, meaning it's in a 100-year case, it has water inundation. So you can see almost everything up to Old Post Road and in some cases beyond floods in these 100-year cases. We were looking at two different things in our model, as I said. One was the Penfield Pavilion, and one was the overall town waterfront. And one of the concerns on the Penfield Pavilion site specifically was looking at it for the instance where site grade would be cut down to elevation 8, which is FEMA's requirement or their definition of quote unquote natural grade. And working with the town engineering department, we wanted to study what would be the issue, what issues could occur if site grade was lowered that far at the Penfield site. What we discovered through our analysis is on a 100-year case, that 100-year storm, there's so many flooding sources in addition to that lowered point, potentially lowered point at Penfield, that it doesn't have what we would call a macro influence or a townwide influence over the flooding. There is a micro influence or a site scale influence where channelization would occur when there's lowered elevation 8, actually trench into the beach area. And the hazard wouldn't necessarily be the flooding on the beach area, because the flooding would occur anyway, but the flooding it would bring with it channelization through Penfield, which would allow scour of the beach and deposition of sand on the land side of Penfield, and then making that breach bigger with each incoming storm. These graphics, I don't know how well anyone's able to see on their screen, but what they're showing is a situation where the Penfield is breached under the proposed FEMA condition at about an hour and a half before the peak of a 100-year storm. And what you can see On the left-hand side, the red box is the blow up of Penfield, and the colored areas are current speeds. The Penfield site isn't breached in that instance. On the right-hand side, you see this greenish color, and again, more in the blow up. That's with the beach area lowered, and that's showing that breach occurring in that 100-year case. So again, it shows that there is flooding in the entire beach area behind Penfield, but that flooding is not coming from Penfield. In the FEMA design case, flooding is also coming from Penfield, but it's not a macro influence. This is just showing the peak, closer to the peak of the storm, where under the proposed conditions, again, we see high current velocities through the breach, which is here. And if we look at the existing conditions, we still have not breached. So it just goes to show you that it would have more water coming through at higher velocities there. In the context, that's the context of Penfield. We were also asked to look at the town-wide waterfront as well, and we weren't asked to look at it for a 100-year case because that was studied by the Army Corps of Engineers in the past. So that work has been done. And what it was, I don't know if you could see here, but there's a blue line from up by Ash Creek all the way around by South Benson, becoming a greenish line here, where it becomes dunes, and then back to this blue line. What this blue line represents is a wall, which would protect the beach area from those floods. And it's a wall ranging in height from, I think, 6 to 12 feet tall. It would be a pretty massive structure. It was estimated by the Army Corps of Engineers at $550 million back in 2019. So that clearly would be escalated now. But it gives a sense of what it would be. It would be a very tall wall. It would be at all the road ends. We either need to have mechanical closures, or the road ends would dead end into this wall. And then it would come with a number of property takings to allow for that wall to go where it needs to go. So we continue to look at other modeling on the town-wide basis, and we looked at it in the 10-year situation. So this was the first thing I showed you was really focused on Penfield. This is looking at the overall town at a more frequent occurrence. And what we found on a 10-year basis, the whole beach area would flood. And that 10-year storm, again, it's stacking up statistical 10-year water levels, statistical 10-year winds at worst case. And what we see is there's breaches occurring to the north first, up by Riverside and Ash Creek, then at the Penfield Pavilion in the proposed condition, and then by Lantern Point. So if we step through, this is again the 10-year case. This is about an hour and a half before the peak of the storm. We have water back behind the beach already at this point, and the flooding source is from up here at Riverside and South Benson. And moving along, time has marched forward another 45 minutes. Now water's come up over the shore at South Benson Marina and continue to flood the beach area. Another 45 minutes later, we're now breaching at these three locations and flooding continuing. So the end result of that effort was really showing that we have, even for a fairly frequent event, a 10-year storm event, we do have the risk of flooding of the beach area. And perhaps it would be worthwhile for the town to investigate raising the shoreline to protect against these more frequent events in the intervening time as things are studied for the less frequent events. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, especially in this kind of virtual forum, but that's the results of our studies to date, and I can answer any questions if that's appropriate, or turn it back over.
Yes, thank you. Would you mind just taking the presentation down so we could see everyone again?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I don't know how the questions are handled.
Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Mottola, you have a question?
Yeah, just so maybe I misunderstood this. There's going to be there would be townwide flooding in a 10-year event if Penfield stayed at the 11-foot elevation. Is that
Correct.
a fair statement? Okay.
Yes.
But by lowering it to 8 feet, your concern is, and maybe I misunderstood, is that you're still going to have flooding, but there could be more scouring in the Penfield area?
Yeah, it fundamentally just doesn't help anything. It would create a channel for water to enter, and as water is rushing through that entrance, it would likely scour. It would make that opening bigger with each repetitive storm, and then it would work around the foundations of the Penfield building and risk scouring those further. So just common practice. You don't like to have hard points where water can attack. You like to have uniformity in the waterfront structures or features.
So the remedy is, once we do what we need to do to Penfield, would be to restore the elevation in the beach area to the current 11 feet. Is that a fair statement? Or at least we should do something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement, and that would seem to me to be a reasonable remedy.
Okay. All right. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Ms. Marmion. You're muted, Sheila.
There you go. So we're talking just about raising Penfield, or do you see concerns across the shoreline in terms of a recommendation to raise the shoreline? That's where I'm confused. I know you talked about the wall, but are there other areas of the shoreline that if we don't raise it, we're also going to risk the flooding?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the auspices of this project was with the Flood and Erosion Control Board of the town, was to work with the town to develop a criteria to set elevations to minimize flooding. Because you do have other flooding sources other than Penfield. So it may make sense to target those areas to come with some level of protection.
So just to follow up on that, if we raised Penfield alone back up to the 11 feet after we, lowered it, do we have any percentage of what flooding we would prevent in that 10-year storm without raising the other elevations? I'm just curious if that...
No, not necessarily. I don't think you would prevent it, because I think it would flood from the other sources. It just, again, it's not helpful. You would have this additional point, and things are very elevation sensitive. So depending on how the waves are attacking, could maybe the water not pile up as much near South Benson, but breach elevation 8 at Penfield if it's really 7.7 feet, just with traffic and wind blown and
So the
Okay.
Penfield investment that we would make to raise that elevation back to the 11 feet is really just literally a drop in the bucket in terms of preventing damage from a 10-year storm across the beach area.
hard to say definitively.
Okay. Just trying to look at the return on the investment for this investment.
Yeah, I don't know how big an investment it is to just put that sand back. The sand's there currently. I understand it needs to be removed to satisfy FEMA, but I don't know if that's a question of removing it, stockpiling it in the parking area, surveying it as built,
I see.
getting clearance from FEMA and putting it back. If that's what it is, then it's a few weeks of machine time, and you already own the material.
Okay, that's helpful. It's a step in the right direction, in other words.
That's what I think.
Yeah, may I comment?
Yeah, Mr. Gerber.
So for me, the big question was, and for the Flood and Erosion Control Board is how are we going to improve coastal resiliency? And for me, the question was, would keeping this building and if we were required to keep the elevation underneath the building at 8 feet and with no restoration of beach elevation, would that preclude us from really doing the soft solutions across the rest of the beach, like beach nourishment and engineering? And so we have to really, do a study for the whole beach. And, the Flood and Erosion Control Board is going to make sure we do that, update the 2015 plan and start executing as much as possible, along the whole beach to try to bring, I believe, they're probably going to end up with several places along the beach where we're going to look at bringing the beach elevation up higher. And I was concerned that if we were not able to do that at Penfield, then we're looking at solutions. The only solutions that would make any sense at that point would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars type of solutions, or the really expensive wall, or which we don't even know if we get approved. And so what I'm so encouraged about by this is that there's the view is that we should restore the beach elevation under Penfield, and then leave open, hopefully within the near future, looking at other places along the beach, along the coast, that we can raise as well to keep out more of this, more flooding. And it sounds like we can do that. And I know that's what Flood and Erosion Control Board is going to be looking at.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Marmion. And thank you, Mr. Gerber. Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I had some technical difficulties and I had to drop off and reconnect, so I may have missed this, but I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Is the plan now to lower the beach to the original estimated natural grade of roughly 8 feet? Satisfy the notice of violation, stockpile the sand at Penfield until after the NOV is remedied, and then return that sand back to the beach and bring it back up to 11 feet? Is that what I'm hearing?
In front of the building, not underneath the building. And I don't think Mr. Sand, Devin, we don't know for sure whether it will be enough sand, but sand isn't expensive, right? Devin, I mean.
Yeah, I don't know how much is needing to be exported as waste versus how much would need to be, because there'd be a fair amount of sand that's out south or east of the pavilion on the beach that would need to come out to get down to elevation 8. I would think that sand was kind of the native sands that were there, not the import material, as I understand it. And
the plan is to. Greg Rauchi's on, but the plan is to stockpile that sand to the extent that it's not contaminated.
Right. I guess I'm a little skeptical that I don't know if it's FEMA or DEEP, but for the better part of a couple of years, we heard that the grade at Penfield had to come down 3 feet to 8 feet, and nowhere along the line was the just question posed, I guess, or answered that, oh, if we move it and then just move it back after we get our report card, that's okay. It just seems a bit odd to me that it would be that simple.
It's a little odd. I agree. The way it was always phrased was there are two separate issues, and we'll deal with that separately. And the way the timing worked out on the study, we would deal with it after the NOV was resolved. I don't think they ever said we couldn't do it. They just didn't. I guess they didn't look into it, but I'm encouraged to hear that it doesn't appear there are any reasons why we can't do it. It's no longer within FEMA's purview. So it would be within TPZ's purview. And Devin, maybe you can explain this better than me, but DEEP would have to be notified.
Yeah, no, Mr. Curley, I understand what you're saying, and it is strange. It's strange that FEMA is requiring this, because that doesn't seem like something they would normally require. But I think there's a few things that have transpired that are not quite as expected. So FEMA is not a regulatory body when it comes into the placement of sand on the beach. The regulatory bodies in that realm would either be Connecticut DEEP or the town's planning and zoning through the coastal area management review. And in which one of those agencies depends on where it is at what elevation. The state's jurisdiction ends at what's called the coastal jurisdiction line, which is around elevation 6 to the NAVD datum, when we're talking about only cutting down to elevation 8. So this would put the replacement of the sand under the town's own review. FEMA doesn't review it. So it's probably a reasonable question to ask FEMA, because you say, well, okay, it seems they want it removed because they want their, I don't know if it's a pound of flesh or if they just want conditions restored. I don't know what it is. I wasn't involved in those discussions, but they want it apparently, and they're not willing to back down on it.
And I don't want to beat this horse to death, but my takeaway from the last couple of years was that they wanted the water to be able to flow past the building and then exit back out afterwards, right? And it sounds like if we're restoring that sand, there's no exit opportunity for that water if there is a breach. But I agree
Craig, I'll let Devin answer that. That was something we had heard a lot, but it sounds like that's not really true, because the elevation is low enough past the pavilion that I think the way Mr. Santa described it was, unless we take the beach down to 5 feet, it's not really coming out anyway. Okay. So we need pumps to pump the water out in a big flood. So that was never, it sounds like that was never really sort of a logical conclusion.
And I think there hasn't been a lot that's logical over the last couple of years, so that I'm fine with that. I do have one other question though, that it relates to the 10-year study. If I understood the presentation correctly, that in the 10-year scenario, it looks like there are roughly six areas where a breach would occur. Penfield would be one of them. But there were 5 others, and I get Correct. That the Army Corps of Engineers solution and $550 million escalated is not realistic. But is your recommendation from RACE that we do address these 6 spots, the Riverside Drive berm, the Ash Creek berm, South Benson, Penfield, and then the address at Fairfield Beach Road? Is that your recommendation?
Well, our recommendation, part of the work that we're doing is to engage with your Flood and Erosion Control Board to develop a plan that's suitable for the town. Because anything that you're doing less than what the Army Corps is suggesting is an interim measure. It's not one that protects homes from flooding by FEMA's definition. It doesn't take them out of the special flood hazard area. So
FEMA's definition is the 100-year storm, right?
That's the 100-year storm, yeah.
Right.
So
And
I
I
think
think most of our residents would worry more about the 10-year storm than the 100-year storm.
it influences them more often by its own
Yeah.
definition. But one of the things we were going to work with the Flood and Erosion Control Board to come up with a recommendation for an elevation of the shorefront that could protect, and whether however that would get administered, whatever that elevation was, there's going to be some give and take. And what we wanted to look at what would be reasonably achievable. Plugging 6 breaches that might result in a few thousand feet of shorefront versus miles of shorefront are different things. So we're going through a sensitivity analysis to see how much shorefront would need to be raised to protect against different levels. And at that point, the town can make some judgment calls as to how it would want to administer that, because you don't necessarily have, some of this is on private property, so how it would get administered would be something that you'd have to work among your own zoning regulations and maybe your POCD,
Right. And
how that would
occur. And that work that you're going to be doing with the Flood and Erosion Control Board, is that part of this study, or would that be a supplemental study, a bigger study that would need to be funded by this board?
That's part of this study.
Okay. And in terms of action items, when would you expect that the Flood and Erosion Control Board would have the information they need to come to this board with, come to the administration with a recommendation, and potentially this board could see a funding request? Is it a 2024 event? Is it a 12 months from now event? What are
that's the actual performance of the work?
Yes.
Or
the recommendation.
The recommendation or the performance of the work?
Either, both. They're both relevant to this board.
I would think the recommendation would be this winter, February, March, finalizing the studies, engaging with FECB, and developing a recommendation in concert with the town. As far as the execution would go, that I can't really comment on that.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Stark, I see your hand up, but I just want to redirect the conversation a little bit to make sure we're focused on the voting matter we have before us, which is Penfield. And all of this conversation is ultimately relevant to the board because when we get our updated capital plan in a month, I'm sure, at some level, these considerations around coastal resiliency will be addressed. It sounds like they're a priority of the administration. But sort of keeping to the topic at hand tonight, I think, the reason for some of the questions, and at least the questions I had, when we approved this project a little less than a year ago, we didn't have a flood study before us, and it wasn't clear whether, we all knew there were multiple areas on the beach where water would breach during a storm, but it wasn't entirely clear how much additional damage we would be doing or what the impact, what the incremental impact of this project would be on those flood risks. And I think the question that several of us had was, mitigating back to a kind of do no harm status, or at least undoing any additional damage that we would do as a result of keeping this building intact. What would that look like? And, what we heard at the time was, we don't know, we'll kind of figure it out later. Now, from what I've heard, and I also kind of scratch my head about the idea that FEMA wants us to take the beach down and then we can build it back up. So I'm not quite sure I understand that. But in any event, if we were to consider the cost of doing this remediation or raising the beach elevation back to be sort of part of this Penfield project, it doesn't sound to me from what you've said that this is millions of dollars. I don't know if it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but it seems like it would be, even if we were to consider it as part of this project, it would be a relatively modest sum. Could you hazard a guess, like order of magnitude, what it would cost to,
I think I'm only bound to get in trouble if I do that. I haven't done any volume takeoffs. I don't know how much material is bound for waste or how much is so.
okay, but
I think I do us all a disservice.
okay. I mean, I'm going to get, is it reasonable to assume that it's, wouldn't be more than in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range?
I mean, I don't have a number for a ton of sand. Devin, would you, or Greg, do you know how much a ton of sand costs?
It's I don't know the yard just ton conversion off the top of my head. Most stuff is transacted in yards, but yeah, maybe it's $40 a yard to get to the beach, and then you got to spread it. But I don't know how much sand we're buying versus how much we're just moving, and then I don't know whether you're moving it with your own town forces or if you're bringing in a contractor. If you're moving with your own town forces, I don't know how you figure that costing. So I would rather not put any number out there just because I don't. Being an engineer, I just like to add it from the bottom and add things together and make it work. I would just be taking a guess.
Okay. I mean, I guess my point was one of the issues I had with this last time was that this was a big open question in terms of cost, and it sounds like it still is, but, and maybe I'm wrong, but we're not talking about the type of solution you're proposing is nothing like some of the things I heard, sort of bandied about before, which is, raising the road and building walls and things that would be so expensive that they would not even be, in our reality. So I guess I would just say that assuming that this is a relatively modest cost, hopefully when we get our next, capital plan update, we can get some type of estimate for this so that we can see what it is. But it doesn't sound to me like this is something that would add, millions of dollars onto the cost of maintaining this building and, leaving the beach in an equally resilient condition as it is today. So I guess I'll just leave it as there. If I'm off base, I'm sure you would say something, but this to me doesn't sound like it's
the only thing I'd say is I wouldn't consider this a quote unquote solution on the order of raising roads or building an Army Corps levee.
No, it's not a solution.
It goes back to the do no harm.
It's fixing what we're disrupting by doing this build. You know what I mean? So if we do re-elevate the beach, we're maintaining this building and we're not leaving that area any worse off than it is today. And
exactly.
It sounds to me that the cost of doing all that is, would likely be relatively modest.
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, I've seen your hand sign up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, a really simple one. I just wanted to understand the colors on the map. If you could run through what the blue, the green, and the red actually mean.
Sure. Some are water surface elevations and some are current velocities, and it depends which one you're looking at.
Okay, that's I heard you mention velocities, and here I was the whole time thinking it was water depth or elevation, as you say. So it depends.
It's.
Let's see.
They're not quite at a scale that I don't know which ones you're looking at. The first couple, the orange ones, that's current magnitude. So that's current velocities, and that shows the breach where it's kind of greenish. Those are the velocities going through the breach. And then the other ones are water surface elevations. But I don't.
Okay, so let's look at the one water surface elevation. It's page 19 of the PDF in the backup. 10-year no SLR, second breach. model time, 1:14:15. What, I just want to know what red and green mean there, and or yellow too.
It's water surface elevations, but at a very fine. I wouldn't.
And what's bad, red or green's bad here, not red, right?
Yeah, green is a higher elevation than red.
Okay. And in that key in the upper left side, do those numbers? What's the unit? Is it meters?
Those are meters. They're meters.
Okay. So this would say that
So I
the red areas would flood with 2 meters of water and the green areas would flood with 2.4 meters of water, roughly speaking.
It's elevation. It's elevation though.
Oh.
It's 2
Can you
meter
explain?
elevation. Again, so you have to know the inundation would be the difference between the water surface elevation and the ground elevation.
Got it. Okay.
And the ground
Great, that's all.
elevation is between 5 and 6 feet, or almost 2 meters. So it varies. So yeah, we'll in our final report we'll give you better sense of what the inundation depth is, which I think is what you're after.
That's
And
right.
I don't know it definitively, and I couldn't even tell you that from these graphics. That's not the intention of it.
Okay. Thanks. That's all.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Stark. Mr. Walsh.
Devin, thank you for being here tonight. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yep, of course.
Great. Just a couple questions in regards to your presentation that you just made. If you go to the presentation and you're talking about velocities, at Penfield, it's kind of the first time you see the green going through. If you don't, I'll get you the page number. Hold on one second. It's page 12 of the PDF.
12?
12 of the PDF. I don't know what page of your report it is, but it's
okay.
Snapshots.
It says current magnitude MS model snapshots.
Model snapshots.
45 minutes after proposed breach. Yep.
All right.
The
So
time of breach and 45 minutes after the breach. Just two of them.
Yep. And the one on the right, you're showing if we lower it to what's proposed, how long it's going to take for it to breach Penfield, correct?
Yeah, there's the one that says model time 1 day, 1 hour, 30 minutes. The first of the two.
Okay. Yep.
That shows on the left-hand side is the current conditions and the right-hand side is the proposed.
Okay.
And that's showing the breach at Penfield. The greenish color is the velocities.
Okay.
And that's showing the channelization. So those are higher velocities as the water kind of shoots through that opening.
And below that, we're also seeing green. So we're having kind of equal velocities coming through, correct? You go below the red box. The red box.
Near at the end of Reef Road?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So water's already coming in through there as well.
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. So water's coming in from other sources. It's not like you plug that in and it solves the problem. But you never want to create breaches. You don't want to create points where you could have channelization.
Okay. And explain for me again the next page where you also
the next
show...
next page is 45 minutes later.
Yeah.
So the breach has occurred.
Yes.
And it's not the height of the storm yet. It's still 45 minutes to the height of the storm. And this is kind of just giving you kind of more sensitivity. We still haven't breached at the Penfield site, the pavilion proper. We've breached just south of it.
Okay.
And we've breached north of it. We've almost breached at it, but we haven't yet. And then you could see other breaching at the end of Reef Road. And then a whole bunch at the dike at the fire training station, the tide gates there.
Okay. I don't think it's the specific direction, but above that box in that same photo of the what we were just talking about, is that the beach club right there?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so they're at 8 feet elevation as well, correct?
it's all really close. And this is what I'm talking about, the sensitivity of, we're looking at LiDAR data, which is the kind of even state scale topography. And your beach grades can go up and down 6 inches or more in various events. So yeah, I think it's right around 8, maybe a little bit above 8.
Yeah, but it looks like the whole beach club, it's breaching there, right?
Yeah, yep.
That's private property, correct?
Yes. Above mean high water it is.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So to do something there, we'd either have to have an agreement or to take their property by eminent domain, the whole beach club.
Right. That's where it comes into however you would implement this. I recall working in Fairfield years and years ago doing bulkheads on Pine Creek. And there was always if we ever did a bulkhead in Pine Creek, we had to bring it up to elevation. I forget what the number is. There's a different datum back then too. But there was some town-wide edict that to get your building permit for that sort of thing, you needed to come into compliance. So
Right.
I think the town would have to think of, on an implementation basis, how would these things go into effect, into force? And I think it would have to go into your zoning regulations, into either plan of conservation development, whatever it would be, such that if you had these properties in these locations, you would be compelled to make them compliant at certain trigger points.
Okay. Mr. Curley had made some interesting comments, which I agree with, in regards to how simple it would be, I guess, just to move right after we finish building, moving the sand right onto our beach. And I also share his skepticism, I think that was the word he used, that it would be so simple. What bodies need to approve that?
Yeah, and I'll say I haven't been involved in these conversations with FEMA, so
Yep.
I don't know if there's anything that I don't know what I don't know.
Okay.
But I've been doing this. All I've done is waterfront work for my entire career, so I've never seen FEMA mandate anything like this. This is I've never seen this regrading mandated by FEMA.
So if
That
the property
said,
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
If the site was, let's just say the site was 8 feet and there was no FEMA violation and you were going to add sand because you wanted to add sand, you would look to see where you were in the state jurisdiction or town jurisdiction, and there's different. State jurisdiction is coastal jurisdiction line out to the water, which is like elevation 6 out, and town jurisdiction is mean high water in. So if you're at elevation 8, you'd be in town jurisdiction, and the town has a coastal area management policies.
Mm-hmm.
The town would review those through a zoning application, and they would refer it to DEEP for comment. So DEEP wouldn't have direct regulatory authority, but DEEP would have comment authority. Now, FEMA isn't in that mix. FEMA's not a regulatory body. But were I in the town's shoes, I would want to ask the question, because you're asking a reasonable question. What if FEMA's requiring the removal? Why would they allow the replacement?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know exactly why they're requiring the removal, and I don't believe they have any authority on the replacement. But
the removal, Devin, is from underneath the building, right? I mean, the replacement would be in front of the building, to the sides. Right?
I had understood, and perhaps I'd misunderstood, that they wanted a trench dug down to elevation 8, all the way until when it daylighted out on the beach.
I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Can we get an answer to that? Can someone get back to us about that question?
Well, I mean, that's not a precondition for this project, or is it? I mean, we need to bring the beach to elevation 8 to satisfy the NOV, whether there's a building there or not. But we definitely, can get an answer to the question. I don't think the approval is necessarily a precondition. I mean, if that's a precondition of approval, then we could postpone, but,
All right. Maybe I'm misunderstanding some of the questions that our chairwoman asked about that this might only be a couple $100,000 to move this out to the front. So I don't know if we even have the right to do it, and that's one of the things we should try to figure out. Because if we don't have the right to do it, then we should just know that and stop talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't think our internal, Eli Gazal, who's been working on this, I don't think anyone's ever said we don't have the right to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I think, all along that just hasn't really been discussed. And,
all right. Is Eli on now?
Eli's on vacation.
Okay. Well, maybe we can get him back for another meeting. I just don't know what this whole thing means about moving and raising elevations of sand to 11 feet just because it's in the beach side of the property, the front, if you want to call it the front or the back. I call it the back towards the beach side, but whatever it is. But I don't know where this question goes. Do we have the right to raise it to 15 feet if we wanted to? Something tells me that Deep is going to have an issue with us raising sand levels all around the town of Fairfield just to push the water to Westport and Bridgeport. I think they're going to have a problem with that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think, Devin, you've answered that, I think. Is that's done all the time, right?
Yeah, beach nourishment projects aren't anything new, and it's not the condition exists currently, so it's not a changed condition. But again, you're asking all reasonable questions that need to be answered.
Devin, what's the definition? You've used this term, and I'm just not familiar with your term of art called beach nourishment. Is beach nourishment just to replenish sand that you've lost, or could beach nourishment be adding 10 feet of sand, 10 feet of elevation of sand?
It could be either.
Could be either.
By way of direct example, we with the town of Fairfield pumped 25,000 yards of sand onto the beach at Jennings.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a beach nourishment project in the eyes of the state.
Okay. And can I ask you a question? Sand moves during storms, correct? Sometimes you gain sand, sometimes you lose sand, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So even if we moved all the sand to an elevation of 11 feet, if we got a big storm, we could lose 4 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, I see communities down in New Jersey and in Long Island who are dealing with the same problem. It seems like every year, and how many millions and millions of dollars it's costing them to do, I guess, what you would call beach nourishment.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, no, every beach community everywhere is facing a similar problem. I think the situation at Penfield in particular is just one of, I don't think you'd want to leave a breach a low point just to not have that scour that could occur.
Yes.
Channelization.
And you raised a good point.
I think you'd rather avoid it.
Yeah, you raised a good point when you talked about that scouring earlier. So I just wanted to ask you a question about that. So after a big storm, if we started noticing scouring, the town could just somehow get sand back down there, pump it in, or whatever they had to do to try to cure that scouring, correct?
Yes. Depending with proper regulatory authority, yeah.
With proper regulatory authority. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that might be it, Devin. But overall, there just seems to be a lot of areas where during, whether it's a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm, water can get into the beach area, correct?
Correct.
And just fixing one one spot out of 15 or 20 is not going to really change the math, correct? On the volume of water that comes in?
No, not. That's correct.
Okay.
But causing, I suppose if you have an issue you can address, you like to address it to not compound the problem.
But I guess my point is that in a way we'd have to commit to kind of, you call them, what do you call the areas of infiltration? What's the term you use? Where water infiltrates.
Oh, breach.
Your breaches.
Okay.
If we have 20 breaches, we would literally have to come up with a plan on how we're going to handle almost all the 20 to have any effect on what a 10-year or 100-year storm is really going to do. Correct?
You showed six right there.
And to throw a curveball at you too, you got to address your stormwater system.
Okay. In what way?
So yeah, you got to make sure you just don't have backflow going under any of these berms, just backfilling your storm catch basins.
Okay. So currently, there's no way to turn those off.
I think some may have check valves and not all.
Okay.
So it's not an easy solution here. There's no
certainly.
There's no magic bullet.
Certainly. I have to say, when you talked about the $550 million estimate by the Army Corps of Engineers in 2019, based on the numbers we've been seeing on estimates since 2019, I'd have to believe that number would be at least $1.5 billion to $2 billion.
It'd be a lot of money, and any of that, I mean, whoever would pay for that, assuming it's looking for federal funding, it would need to survive a benefit cost analysis, and I don't know that it would do that if you say how many millions would it take to raise every house.
I know that's kind of my point. I think Storm Sandy made a lot of people raise their houses, and another storm would make another group of people raise their houses, and so on and so on.
So no, it's not an easy. This is a challenge that the town is facing.
Sure, it is. All right, I appreciate it.
I'm offering data. I'm not necessarily offering solutions.
I understand that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Devin.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Walsh, I appreciate your questions. And just to clarify, I mean, I guess, my question was more around, and this was the question I had a year ago on this project is, understanding that there are multiple areas of risk along our coastline. Were we doing something here that was going to make the problem worse? And if we were, then what would remediating it cost? Because in my mind, that should be considered as part of the cost of this project. Now, we went forward and, the town bodies went forward and approved this in the absence of that information anyway. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But now we have a study, and if I can believe everything I've heard, it sounds encouraging, because it sounds like at least we can, mitigate what additional problem we might be creating here. Not to say that we're going to solve all the problems, but if we were to mitigate the additional problems that we might be creating by raising that beach, it doesn't sound to me like a solution that is out of the question financially, at least from everything I've heard. So that was my only point, and I wanted to clarify that. But I do just want to stay on the I do want to, again, try to just redirect this to questions about Penfield, and we have to get to the financials, because some of these questions that we're talking about now will again become relevant. And when we get the updated capital plan from the administration, again, to the extent that these things are a priority, I'm assuming we may see some of this reappear. So I think it's all helpful background. But does anyone else have any questions about this study as it relates to the current project? Okay. All right. Maybe a question to the first selectman then. The other backup that's in our package, I will maybe, I'm sure that everyone on the board has reviewed it, but there's information in there about the additional costs and what triggered the 1.4 million, which you walk through in your opening statement. And then there's a schedule in here that adds up to the portions of the costs that are the substantial improvements. So kind of the FEMA 50-50 rule. Is there, maybe what I'll do is just open it up to the board. Does anyone have questions on either of those pieces of the financial analysis? Mr. Mottola.
I guess, my question would relate to the design and because how many months ago? 6 months ago, we were told that I think we were told that the beam structure design that was proposed, they thought they'd be able to do it, and now it's been changed. And how confident are our engineers and contractors? How confident are they now with the new design? Are you going to come back in 3 or 4 months from now and say that's not going to work, that design? That would be my concern. I don't know who wants to answer it.
Hey, can you guys hear me? It's Greg Rayusi from Bismarck Construction Company.
Yes,
Lori,
we can
you
hear
hear me?
Hey, yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
I have Paul Sheen with me, who is the structural engineer that's worked under the architectural firm Joseph Seapock. When we first came to the board, we were the design was to use the same system that's currently under the building with grade beams. After it was approved, we went ahead and by group decided the best bet, because we're on a coastal line, is to hire Race to do an analysis. They did, and after they were done with the loads, we had to change the design. We had no choice. And if you think about going from elevation 12.5, where the top of grade beam is now, and you're dropping 4 feet, approximately 4 feet, you're cutting away 4 feet of pile friction that holds the loads. So I think Grace can answer it if he's still on the phone, or Paul's here. He can get a little clearer on what the design requirements were. I've read that, there's a snapping action, but I think in a storm, when the surge comes, the power of the waves against the area of the grade beams, because there were so many, caused a real big issue for us. So we had to come up with a solution, and we went from 110 piles to 440 piles. So there's a whole process. We can't excavate the whole building at once. We have to do it in quadrants, and I think I talked about it. So there's a lot of different issues that come into play working under the building, because we're not moving the building elevation. We're just working under the building. Paul, you want to just add to that? Because I know you're on the...
Yeah, no, so actually, Greg, you did a pretty amazing job of explaining what happened. And that's exactly right. So the original design was to keep everything as it was. When we received the scour loading from Race, which is the loading against that concrete, those grade beams, it actually failed the piles because the piles were shortened by 4 feet. So the only option then became adding additional piles, and because the building is there, we're held to pretty tight headroom. Our only option was to go with a helical pile solution, which doesn't have a lot of capacity, which is why there are more piles than the wooden timber piles that are existing. But it was one of the very, it was a very, we didn't have many solutions that we could run with trying to work underneath that building. So we came up with the best solution that we have, and we think it's actually going to result in much less concrete. We're adding piles, but we're also reducing the amount of concrete that'll be underneath the building when it's all finalized. So that is basically where we are. And yes, we're very confident with, given the loads that we have from Race, that this is a good solution.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mr. Walsh?
Madam Chairwoman, can we talk about anything from before, or are you just wanting to talk about I just want to make sure my question is going to be germane. I wanted to talk about the numbers that are on page 2 of the PDF.
Yes. So any of the financial analysis. So I think we were done with the flooding discussion. So any of the financial analysis. So either the composition of the 1.4 or the remaining pages which get to the 50-50 calculation.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a couple of questions of Mr. Gerber in regards to the calculation of the 1.429950. So at our last meeting, Mr. Gerber, you said that we were $1.5 million over. Do you remember that?
I don't, but that was probably an estimate. I mean, that was the number that was given to me by Eli, but I hadn't seen the details at that point.
Okay, because I asked for the details to be produced to the Board of Finance, and I have not seen them. Last meeting, as I asked for them.
So, do you have in the backup? You're looking for more than what is here?
What I'm looking for is this $1.4 million the same 1.5 you said at the last Board of Finance meeting, or has this number changed because you suggested that you and Eli may have just added this 5% owner's contingency?
Well, I approved it, and I guess he wanted it all along. But
when did you approve it?
When he came to my office and we went through the numbers, I said it makes sense.
Okay, was that in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Was it
that was within the last 2 weeks.
Okay, because what I'm trying to figure out is that's what I thought, is that you made it seem as though that it was recent that you added the 620, but at the Board of Finance meeting you said that we were over by $1.5 million. So I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I hadn't seen the details, so he must have loaded that in. I don't. Yeah. Okay,
because if we were over by 1.5 at the last Board of Finance meeting, where did $500,000 go to? Or actually $600,000 go to that allowed you then to put the owner's contingency in?
That's a fair point. I had not seen the details at that point. I just was working off what I was told. So he must have loaded that number.
Could you send us or have Eli provide us with what the calculation was for the $1.5 million? I'd just like to see what number then all of a sudden changed.
As opposed to the 1,429,950?
Yes, because $620,000 is brand new in the last 2 weeks. So where was the $600,000 at the last Board of Finance meeting?
Well, I don't know if it was brand new in the last 2 weeks. That's when I knew about it.
So Mr. Gerber, are you saying that that the $1.5 million or $1,429,000, whatever the number is, that was the number provided to you by internally by Eli, and at the time he provided it, he had the additional contingency in there because he felt that that was appropriate?
It must have been. I hadn't seen any numbers up till that point.
Okay. So if that's the case, if that's the case, it sounds like, this is what we have now, $1,429,000. It sounds like, Jim, if that was the case, and it makes sense because we've been told multiple times that, there are contingencies relating to this, not necessarily to the construction because we have bids, but certainly to the remediation. We don't know how much actual material is underneath the building and what it's going to cost to get rid of it. So I think that's what I'm hearing. I think there's a different analysis.
What I'm hearing is Mr. Walsh wants to know why I said I approved the contingency if it was already included. And the answer I would give is that I didn't know there was a contingency. I hadn't seen the details.
Right.
Eli came into my office. We went through the details. He pointed to the contingency and said, are you okay with that? And I said, it makes a ton of sense to me.
Got it.
And that's where we are.
Okay. So really the cost overruns then are really $900,000, and we're now adding a 5% owner's contingency, correct?
That's right.
It's actually an $809,000 contingency.
Right, and that number is
overrun with a $620,000 owner's contingency.
Yeah, I think all those numbers are on the sheet in the backup, and that's correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for right now. I just didn't understand the math compared to what it was the last time and hearing about a new number. So, okay.
Right, and I think that number of 1.5, I don't believe that was the first. I mean, I don't think I'm the first person to use that number. I think other people were throwing that number out. But the I do want to raise a point. I don't know if any people have other questions, but and Mr. Rauchi, you might want to confirm this. It's there. I think everyone needs to be aware that there is a expectation, or there's a amount of fill removal that is implicit in this GMP bid, and if it turns out that fill is deeper, or that there's more that needs to be removed, is it possible that that cost could go up? Because that seems to be the one thing which you do not have control over.
Right. So right now, we own about 7,000 yards based on Weston and Sampson's survey of the soil under the building. He gave us a depth. We analyzed what the yardage was. We have that in the bid. Right now on the hot spot that's left under the building, they haven't finished, but there's a vein of that PCB soil that has to come out that hasn't been totally explored. That's separate from what we're working on the building. But out of that 7,000 yards, there's a possibility when they start digging the soil out, it might be intermixed, but Weston and Sampson is pretty sure that that's the original base 4 feet under the building, because we have to go to elevation 5 to get the equipment in to do the work. So Bill's kind of right. Is it a possibility? Could that be an overrun? Yes. I don't really know the answer to that.
And it's not really consolation, but the truth is we would have to remove that no matter what. So it's not like, that's not really project related.
Mr. Walsh?
A follow-up, I guess, for Mr. Gerber or Mr. Rauchi, I guess, is on the numbers on page 2, Mr. Gerber, did you say that included the removal of the hot spots?
No.
No, the hot spot numbers are separate.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted to hear. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I have no questions on that, but I do have a question, Madam Chairwoman, on the FEMA calculation, but I'm willing to let other people ask some questions. I've been talking for a bit.
Sure. So does anybody else have questions on the 1.4 million, Ms. Ruggiero?
Thank you. So I'm still trying to get a thorough understanding. I have the page in front of me of the 1.4, and I understand the 5% contingency is 600,000 of it, which I understand and makes sense to me. What I see to the right, like decks and ramps, is 300,000. It gives a breakdown of the 800,000. Was the decks and ramps not part of the original estimate, or is this incremental cost associated with it?
It was, but after reviewing the condition with the town, let's say twice a year, they sand and paint the wood and the railings that are there. So through design, we selected a product that would weather and not need to be painted. So the product was pretty expensive. It's almost like a spin-off of the iPay board they use sometimes. So it's a product that's pretty reliable and won't need to be maintained for the town.
All right, so it's just a change
item
to a better product that's more resilient.
Correct.
That drove the increase. So I guess with the cost of the builder's risk insurance, is that an increase? Or I'm assuming somebody had risk insurance in the original estimate. What caused the $200,000 increase?
That's a good question for Bill. Bill has info on it, but nothing. It just seems they had a very difficult time getting coverage for the project because of the risk.
Okay, so so if I was to go through, I'm trying to get to the heart of the 1.4 because that's what we're voting on here. So each one of these, there's a reason something happened. The deck, that makes total sense to me. Insurance,
right?
It's clearly a risky project.
Right. We found that there was
what
additional.
What are these piles? The helical?
Oh, that's the
piles?
helical piles. The helical piles we were talking about, the additional piles for the building that are required, caused an increase.
Okay, so that's just the structure and again, to make sure that it's more resilient. Okay, that's very helpful.
Correct.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So, and just to follow up to Ms. Ruggiero, so is it fair to say that the design change is really, the cost of this design change is the $300,000 there? The miscellaneous metals and the helical piles, roughly?
Approximately. You know, there could be a little variance, but
okay,
pretty clear.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quickly, and Mr. Walsh touched on it, but I'm not sure I followed. I appreciate the addition of the 620 for the owner's contingency, but did I hear correctly that the existing contingency was roughly 200,000, so that the total contingency is roughly 800,000? Do we know the total contingency?
That would be you, Greg.
So I'll jump in quick. Right now, there's a construction contingency on top of the owner's contingency of 5%. That's included in 11,000,003 and change, and that's $471,000.
But do we? I'm sorry. Can you translate that into dollars? What was it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 471,233. Construction contingency on top of the owner's contingency.
So we have almost 1.1 million in total contingency.
Correct. And what I said to Bill today is my contract is whatever I don't spend goes back to the town.
Yep. Okay.
100%.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. That's helpful. This is a question for you, Mr. Gerber. Are you comfortable with the math and the methodology and where the numbers are coming out on the 50/50 calculation?
Well, that's a good question.
Can I add to that, Bill?
I'm sorry, what?
Can I add to that
Greg,
for a minute?
you're the better person to answer that. But.
Mr. Curley, you know what we did is during the scope review with the different bidders, we had them break out what the cost was for the 50/50. So Eli and I now, when we do the requisitions, we're going to have a separate set of line items for the 50/50, so it's documented on the requisition in case it has to go to FEMA. So we're going to identify those costs that relate to the 50/50. And I was I'll be honest with you, I was a little nervous about it after I did the job, but it worked out fairly well at the 2.7. I was happy to see that.
And I think the cap is roughly 3.6 or in that neighborhood, right?
Correct.
So we have about 800 to 900,000 of cushion right now.
Correct.
Okay, that's.
And I'd be glad to explain that to anybody. You know, if you wanted to review it with someone in town, Eli and I are open for discussion. But I'm pretty confident about that number because they're direct from the subs that did the project.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Ms. Ruggiero, your hand is still up. Are you okay? Are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry I didn't take it down.
Okay, no, that's good. Does I know Mr. Walsh had questions on the other analysis. Does anyone else have any questions on the 1,000,004? Okay. Mr. Walsh, go ahead.
We can't hear you.
Are you muted
You're
or?
on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Mr. Gerber, do you have full confidence that we are fine on the 50-50 calculation? Because I knew when your last meeting, one of the reasons you were afraid to go forward was you would not go forward with it until you got that answered. So you have full confidence now that you have all the answers. We're not going to be going over the 50-50 rule.
Well, what I know now is that, and it was really, what I know now is that a resident was sending emails to FEMA. Melissa Surratt responded that I know that Tom Bremer and Eli had reviewed the 50-50 calculation. I know what they sent FEMA, which is a version of what you have in the backup, and that the response in writing by email was that they are they're in line with that calculation. That's really all I can go by. I mean, I don't think, from what I understand, we're not going to get like a sign off from FEMA directly.
So nothing has really changed other than you received a copy of an email that a resident of this town said?
That is it. A copy of an email.
Okay.
And
that's a dangerous place to be.
Well,
It's a dangerous place to be if we're relying on an email from one resident of our town and not.
I agree, but it's less dangerous than it was a month ago.
Hey,
oh really?
Can I jump in for a minute, Bill?
Yeah.
Mr. Walsh, just so you know, somewhere is documented within whatever was received by Tom Brenner from FEMA, exactly what had to be calculated for the 50-50 as it related to the foundation change, the grade change.
Yes.
So whatever was listed, I know that Tom and Eli have had those discussions to confirm what they were looking for. And that's how we came up with the pricing, because it was all something with feedback from FEMA. And that's kind of what the rule we followed when we put the 50-50 together.
And that hasn't changed. But
No.
And someone asked for written confirmation, and FEMA doesn't typically do that. But I think the email that Marissa Surratt sent is more than they normally would do.
So they would give an individual resident that's not connected to the town an email that the town is relying on.
Yeah, I can forward it. I can forward it to you. Well, no, I mean, we were relying on conversation.
Of this town, they will not give you a letter or an email to confirm it to you as the chief executive of the town of Fairfield?
I think you've asked that question of other people in the past, or other people have asked for that kind of confirmation. The answer was always no. And I don't know why she was willing to respond to this resident that way, but it certainly was a nice development because it's not typical, apparently.
All right, you have the copy of this email?
Mr. Gerber, Mr. Walsh, I just want to clarify. Mr. Gerber, from my understanding, Tom Bremer was also included in that correspondence to the resident, was he not?
He was. He had been copied on it.
Okay, so when the resident wrote to FEMA and FEMA responded, they included Mr. Bremer in the correspondence. So the response did in fact come to the town, and it confirmed that FEMA had had the conversations with the town and that they did not take any issue with.
They didn't take any issue, and up to that point, they had not put anything in writing. And you know, and I'd been in plenty of meetings where people had asked for that in writing, and the answer was, "You're not going to get it in writing." This is the closest thing we've gotten in writing.
Mr. Gerber, do you have a copy of that email?
Sure.
Can you supply it to the Board of Finance, please? Making a formal request or chairwoman.
Sure.
Okay. Well, it's just good to know that I guess as town residents, we should just all start contacting federal agencies and start asking them for positions on multi-million-dollar projects and asking
Well,
them to get back to us, and that they'll reply, that they'll actually reply.
I mean, I agree with you. It's strange, and I think Mr. Bremer was surprised. And I'll forward the whole chain to you.
Okay. Have you talked to your town attorney and gotten a position or a ruling or a legal opinion in regard to whether the town can rely on that email?
Well, the town attorney used we used Wigan and Dana, and the lawyer for Wigan and Dana, not Mike Miller, Elliot, was it Kasdan, reviewed the correspondence that the town had sent to FEMA, and he didn't see any issues with what we had sent to them. But then again, you know, we don't have emails back or correspondence back from FEMA saying that your calculation is correct. Just that this email, and you know, that is what it is, and it has been that way for a long time. I mean, I can't believe you'd be surprised by that, to be honest.
Well, what I'm surprised about is, have you gotten a legal opinion from our town attorney in regards to whether we can rely on this email to this resident of the town of Fairfield about that the calculation is correct on the 50-50 rule?
Well, you know, no, I haven't. I'm just telling you, we have an email. I mean, I don't think we're going to rely on an email. I think we're going to rely on what we sent them and the reviews that were done and the conversations that were had. But I mean, if you want me to ask for reliance on that email, if the answer is no, or should we not move forward, I'm not really sure where you're going with this.
Well, I think where I'm going for it is your concern, which you raised a concern last month about it, and you said that you really want to get comfortable with the 50-50 rule, and I'm now finding out that part of that confidence that you feel much better about is that you're relying on one email exchange between a town resident and FEMA.
Well, I also had a chance to go through the calculation that we sent and the backup that we sent to FEMA. I mean, that's the main reliance. I mean, that was not, that information had not been made public.
Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to getting that email. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would like a copy of the email as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it will,
I mean,
yes,
you can
we'll
all-
get it to the entire board.
I'm
Yeah,
not
you
sure
can-
why
you
it
can all
wasn't
get it.
included for tonight's meeting, to be honest.
I mean, we didn't ask for it to be included, but I just want to make a comment because, and to Mr. Walsh's point, you know, I think board members may recall that I did not vote in favor of this project a year ago. And this was one of my significant concerns, was this whole 50-50 issue. And yeah, I'm glad we have something in writing from FEMA. That's fine, even if it went to a resident on copy to the town. But I think what I feel better about here is seeing the actual calculation, knowing that it was reviewed by our outside counsel, what we sent to FEMA, and also seeing that we have a fair amount of headroom. That was something I misunderstood when we had this discussion last March. I thought that we, and I don't know how, like, you know, Mr. Curley, you might remember this too, because I remember the two of us were concerned about this, but I thought that there was only a couple $100,000 at that time of headroom before we bumped into that 50-50 calculation. And then, you know, I heard a month ago that this project was going to be more expensive, and I was very concerned that the additional cost would eat up that headroom that we had. So now what I'm seeing is that we have the calculation here in detail that includes the increased cost, and that we still have some $900,000, which in relative terms is very substantial, before we hit the 50%. So I don't know about anybody else, but you know, knowing that FEMA typically doesn't provide these things in writing, I would say that's what makes me feel better about this, more so than the resident, you know, the email to Tom Bremer and the resident. I mean, that's fine. I think that's, helpful, but that is, that wouldn't be the basis of my comfort level. It's more this calculation. So I'll just say that for the record. Does anyone else have questions on this calculation, this 50-50 calculation? Okay. Are there any other questions? Are there any questions on the resolution itself or anything else related to this voting matter? Okay. Is the board ready to go ahead and vote? Okay. I'll take that as a yes. So all in favor then of approving the resolution referenced in item 3 of the agenda and set forth on page 1 of the meeting materials, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Ms. Charlton, Ms. Leclerc, I didn't see Ms. Leclerc, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Marmion, Mr. Testani, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Stark. Mr. Curley, you're not on camera. Are you?
Yeah, my video froze, but I'm a yay.
Okay. All right. So it is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. All right. And so I want to thank the Mr. Rauchi and Mr. Santa, if he's still there, for being here with us tonight and for answering all our questions. We really appreciate it. All right. So we're going to move to item 4, which is also related to this. So this is to hear, consider, and act on a request from the CFO to transfer $1.4 million from the debt service fund to Penfield Remediation and Construction Fund, the Capital Projects Fund, for the remediation, construction, and costs to address the notices of violation at Penfield Pavilion. So can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Ms. Marmion. All right, so the materials for this item are included on page 24 and 25 of the posted materials. Just as a quick intro, a similar version of these schedules were presented at our December meeting to show the funds that were previously set aside for remediation and Penfield construction expenses to date, the spending against those funds and the balances. So the numbers on these schedules provided to us have been updated for any activity since December, and they also show what the various balances will be if the proposed transfer is approved. So I will turn this over to Ms. Bassi. Do you want to walk us through anything? I mean, I think the schedule is pretty self-explanatory, but do you want to quickly walk us through it?
Sure. So I'm looking at the schedule labeled Capital Projects Fund Activity. So again, you guys have seen a lot of these kind of numbers and columns and appropriated numbers. But essentially what this is doing, saying that we have 23 million appropriated, we've expended about 7.7. Again, just a little update from, I think, the last time you've seen these. We have requisitions, and then we have that available 13,656,175. So that's kind of the important number here. Again, some of these numbers are older. The operating budget, the 918,000 was spent, back in 2019 going forward. And we've used a lot of surplus, right? Going from 21, 22, and subsequently 23 to fund a lot of these remediation projects. So what this schedule is basically showing is the 11.6, which has already been appropriated, which you guys just spoke about, which is now a 13 and change number. So in order to fund this additional 1,429, we need to transfer from debt service this 1.4. So we rounded it to 1.4 because there's a little bit left, and we can go over these numbers down below. So the top section is just that. It's showing the available of the 13,656. The next section, which correlates to the remaining liabilities right above it, is the remaining liabilities, the authorized projects. So we still have, as you guys are aware, the small sites. There's 2 of the 40 still remaining, estimated to be about $1,050,000, and those numbers came from tie-in bonds, basically at the end of June. So that's moving forward. That's the tennis facility and the Frank Rice Trail. The next line item is one that was just touched upon during the previous presentation, are the hot spots. So the hot spots at Penfield, this is a number of this 550, and in my mind, I'm wondering if that was the 500 that was referenced as to the $1,005,000 last time, and the confusion between now needing $1.4 million and the contingency being 600 of it. I'm wondering if at the last presentation that included the Penfield hotspots, because that is about that $500,000 number that was just spoke out. And right underneath it clearly is Penfield, what's remaining on the original 11.6, and then now this $1,429 coming before you. So those remaining liabilities adding up to the 13,584. So in order to get there, we need to transfer $1.4 million out of debt service, which is the last kind of boxed item. So we're proposing to take, there was two surplus amounts from fiscal 22 that are sitting in debt service, a $500,000 and a $780,000. So we would use the balance of the surplus from 22 and needing an additional $120,000 from the current year surplus. So that would add up to the $1.4 million transfer. So we would transfer that in now to the Penfield construction, leaving the $7,974,000 left in debt service, which is just shy of the $8 million that was just transferred in from the June 23 audit. So in doing this, we're covering all of those remaining liabilities that we have in the middle section of the page. And then obviously the elephant in the room is that bottom number, which is the aggregate fill pile, which we received an estimate from Weston and Sampson of the $8,760,000. So that's still to be addressed in the future. But this $1.4 million would make us whole for the two remaining sites, Penfield hotspots and the 1.4 for the construction that was just spoke about this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. And just for reference for the board, this transfer, so the Board of Selectmen voted on the resolution, the spending resolution, and the RTM will vote on that also. This portion only needs to be voted on by this body. So this is because it's a transfer. So we had already, all three bodies had already approved the transfer of surplus into debt service on previous dates. And so we are simply, moving that into the capital projects account to cover this $1.4 million that we just approved. So does anybody have any questions on this? Mr. Mottola.
Thank you. I understand everything. Maybe I missed this. The informational section, Caitlin, the aggregate fill pile estimate, Weston and Sampson of 8.7 million. Where is that coming from? Did we get something on this?
Well, we have available I'm sorry, I cut you off, but there is still available in that middle section, that's $7,974,000. But that whole fill pile really is something to be addressed in the future.
Yeah, so John, and let me just jump in.
What's the number? Where's the number come from?
So for Weston, for purposes of the CAFR, right, we have to disclose this liability because it's a known, we don't have to record it, but we have to disclose it because it's a known risk that is, I guess probable and estimable is the criteria.
That's right.
So if you recall last year, I think that number was actually a little bit higher that got disclosed in the CAFR or the ACFR. So that number was updated as of the end of June 30th, and that's the number that's in our financials disclosed as an estimate for that aggregate fill pile. It assumes, and the footnote's not here on this schedule, but we talked about this last month. It assumes that the method of dealing with that is that site will be capped as a landfill.
Right.
And so that's from Weston and Sampson. So it's really just informational to say, and that is probably, many years into the future, but it's just that, we still have money in debt service, but we have that liability out there as well. Yep. So that's just
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you for refreshing my recollection on that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions on this? Mr. Walsh?
It says a request by the CFO. Why isn't the CFO here tonight?
So the CFO Jared is out of the office and Caitlin is filling in for him. So he is not here.
Okay. Because he's also our clerk. So he's out? He's out for what?
Yeah, he's just out of the office and Caitlin's filling in. I don't really have anything more than that.
Okay. Because there's rumors out there that he's been replaced. Can that be addressed by the CEO, Mr. Gerber?
No, that's a
No?
personnel issue.
So he's still employed as of today with the town of Fairfield?
He is, yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
All right. Any other questions on this item? Okay. All right. Seeing none, we can move to a vote. All in favor of approving the request to transfer 1.4 million from the debt service fund to the Penfield Remediation and Construction Fund, please raise your hand. Okay, it is Mr. Curley. I can't see you. Could you?
Yep, I'm a yes.
Okay, thank you. It is unanimous, 9-0. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move to item 6. To hear a presentation on economic development from Community and Economic Development Director Mark Barnhart. So first, Mr. Barnhart, thank you for hanging in, and sorry to keep you waiting so long, but we appreciate you being here once again this year, and look forward to hearing what you have to say. I know you didn't provide any materials in advance, but if you have something that you want to share on the screen, that's helpful. So I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, hopefully you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I do have a presentation which I will now attempt to share, although I haven't done this before with WebEx. So let me see if we can get this queued up here. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Terrific. So again, my name is Mark Barnhart. I'm the Director of Community Economic Development. Pleasure to be with the Board of Finance again this evening, as we did last year, just to provide a quick rundown with regard to business conditions here in town. So let's see if I can get this thing to move ahead. There we are. So first, a little bit about my office. I think folks are familiar with what we do from an economic development perspective. We're in a position to do what we can to assist businesses here in town, to help them prosper and grow, help folks start new businesses, as well as attract new business investment to Fairfield. But in addition to that, we provide staff support to 4 boards and commissions, including Economic Development and the Affordable Housing Committee, where we work to satisfy the town's affordable housing obligations. We do that with a small but mighty team of 3 folks, 3 full-time employees, with about a $300,000 budget, representing about 0.3% of the town's budget as a whole. I don't need to tell you, but Fairfield is a great place to live, work, play, raise a family, start a business. But in terms of our positioning statement to attract new business investment, Fairfield has many advantages. Obviously, we're located in one of the most, the I-95 corridor. We certainly accentuate the fact that we have both a highly educated and highly productive workforce with many folks with advanced degrees. We're proud to host 2 outstanding private universities, giving businesses the access to a deep talent pool, access to the New York metropolitan area, and we think an ideal blend of both urban style amenities that you find in much larger communities in a suburban setting. When I appeared before you last year, I talked a little bit about some of the headwinds that businesses were encountering, inflationary pressures, supply chain disruptions, tight labor market. Thankfully, those conditions have eased somewhat. Obviously, the Fed's monetary policy in terms of raising interest rates had something to do with bringing, their stated goal to bring inflation back under control within their guidelines. But in raising those interest rates, which are now at a 10-year high, that's had an effect in terms of financing for new development projects. Fed recently has paused those, obviously, and signaled that they're willing to consider rate cuts in the year ahead. Obviously, the timing of that will have some impact in terms of new investment activity here. Looking at some of the macroeconomic factors, Fairfield again has had a fairly low unemployment as a whole. The country, state, region, town were at or near historic lows in terms of unemployment. Looking at our vacancy rates, Fairfield County as a whole has pretty significant vacancy rates, but Fairfield's doing quite well relative to other parts, other submarkets within that county, notably the Stanford Central Business District, Norwalk, with vacancies upwards of 30, in the case of Norwalk, 42%. Fairfield's down close to where it was pre-COVID, around low teens. This applies across all sectors where we see vacancy fairly low. In terms of commercial building activity, again, we're seeing that ebb somewhat. That's fairly consistent with historical trends. We've had two fairly robust years in 2021 and 2022 in terms of activity in the commercial and institutional sectors. It's dropped off a bit. Part of that obviously is related to interest rates and financing, capital markets. But we're seeing, again, continued activity. A lot of the activity we do see is in what we call EDS, meds and beds. Obviously, both universities have been on a fairly significant capital campaign to enhance their campus facilities, meet growing enrollment. We've seen new apartment construction, new housing construction, as well as sectors with medical office. Looking again, the development activity we're seeing is throughout town. The green upper left-hand corner is a new 6,300 square foot veterinary hospital being constructed for Dr. Marsh's practice in the Greenfield Hill area, which we anticipate coming online midway through 2024. Moving clockwise to the upper right corner is the 25,000 square foot medical office building across from the Motel Hi-Ho on the former plant factory site being constructed for Hartford Healthcare. That's a little bit further behind. We anticipate that coming online towards the end of the 2024 calendar year. Lower right corner is the new 100-unit apartment building near on Park Avenue across from Sacred Heart or nearby near Sacred Heart University. This is significant in that we anticipate this getting in a position to get a CO around May of this year, which will provide sufficient points for us to apply for our first housing moratorium under 830G. And in the lower left-hand corner is the new location for illicit brewing, a new restaurant, hospitality, entertainment center, beer hall, a microbrewery being constructed or renovated the space next to the new Fairfield Metro Center train station and a site that was formerly occupied by Planet Fitness. I know I included this slide last year, but I think a picture is worth a lot of words in that this represents the commercial land within town that is zoned for commercial industrial uses, which represents about 4.5% of our land mass. It is highly productive and it accounts for roughly 12% of our grand list. In terms of, the Planning and Zoning Commission is reviewing its plan of conservation and development. We don't anticipate significant changes as it relates to the distribution of these uses along those two primary access corridors, Post Road, Black Rock Turnpike. The Economic Development Commission is largely supportive of the draft POCD, but does see opportunities for the commission to look at its parking regulations in particular more comprehensively. There might be additional opportunities there. Parking does drive development activity, so looking at ways in which we can tighten those up a bit. as well as perhaps expanding the commercial port along the Kings Highway. Again, last year I included this slide. We did look at tax impact by various uses, mixed use, residential. These facilities are commercial assets in every sense of the word. Land is obviously a finite resource, very expensive. And so it's not surprising that projects that allow for some to leverage that asset best do yield significant property taxes to the town. In the case of the Alto Fairfield complex, almost $1 million a year, about $6,000 to $7,000 in taxes per unit. And looking at the most recent Board of Ed data, these produce very few kids, school-age children. In the case of the Anchorage, the one at 333 Umpqua Road, that represents about 0.08 kids per unit, and the Alto is 0.06 kids per unit. Overall, these multifamily developments represent about 0.13 school-age children per residential unit townwide. And then I just wanted to give a quick rundown, a couple of the development sites that we are closely monitoring. I won't spend too much time on these. I'm happy to answer questions. But with regard to the former XI battery site, we had the Planning and Zoning Commission had done a informal pre-application review of a proposed mixed-use development. Part of the POCD had included a recommendation to extend the center design business district further southward towards the Mill River to encompass this site. It's a key gateway site. Recently, however, the ownership indicated that they've signed a ground lease to the Penske Auto Group to relocate the Porsche dealership on Commerce Drive to this location with the new dealership location. So that does indicate some limitations in terms of the town's ability to control what transpires at some of these key sites. The crossings at Fairfield Metro, a long-awaited mixed-use development. First building, number 4, a 7-unit residential, is under construction. The site was purchased in 2022 by Accurate Builders and Developers. The next building to be considered is the Concourse building, which would include the 118-key hotel. Planning and Zoning Commission did conduct, again, a pre-application review earlier in March of this past year. We do anticipate the developer making an application to both inland wetlands and planning and zoning in the first quarter of this year. Next to the proposed the new location for illicit brewing, we have the Brownfield site. It was once part of the Bullard's Foundry, as well as the entire Metro Center area. This is under contract to Post Road Residential, the developers of the Anchorage downtown. Similarly, they conducted a pre-application review with regard to their concept in 2022 and have since submitted an application in October. We anticipate that going to public hearing next month. And then the only property for which I don't have much good news to report is the former Handy and Harmon site at 333 Grassmere Avenue. Obviously, one half of the site, which used to host the manufacturing facility, has long been redeveloped for a Whole Foods anchored retail plaza. The remainder, which is nominally a little over 9 acres, but really in terms of its actual utilization, is about 2 to 3 acres, given wetlands, extensive wetlands on the site, is still under a consent order and is conducting the risk assessment and evaluation of various remediation options for that site. So that's a quick rundown. I know you have other things on your agenda, and I'm sure there are questions from members of the board. I'm happy to take those at this time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barnhart, for your presentation. Appreciate it. Questions from the board? Mr. Testani.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the only thing I'd ask Mark is if we could just get a copy of that. I thought, number one,
Absolutely.
thank you for being here. Number two, I thought the presentation was great. Number three, hopefully we'd like to get some updates as to what, I mean, obviously you gave us one tonight, but perhaps more frequent on what areas are outstanding and what you're trying to do, like this Handy and Harmon issue, to rectify those issues. That's the only thing I would ask. Perhaps a quarterly update would be appropriate, Madam Chair.
Well,
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. I'm not, yeah, let me think about that, Jack. I don't know if we want to bring Mark back every quarter. I think,
No, I was suggesting an email update.
oh, sure. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
Mark,
happy to.
Mr. Barnhart, let's talk about it. Yeah, I think, again, the purpose of Mr. Barnhart being here is we all, A, have a curiosity as to what's going on in town, and B, ultimately, all of these issues impact the town's financial position to some degree, either in the short or the long term. So, and what we were doing in the past was trying to get all this information out of him during a budget hearing where it really didn't belong. So, I think having him come before the board separately is a, great, it's a great opportunity. So maybe what we can figure out is if, Mr. Barnhart, if you happen to have, updates that you're presenting to, in other forums, to other groups that could be made available to the board periodically, I think that would be terrific.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. I obviously provide monthly updates to the Economic Development Commission. Any member of this board would be more than welcome to attend those meetings, but I can also provide periodic updates to this board as well in terms of material changes. A lot of the development, it moves quickly in some sense, but also, these things typically take a 3 to 5 year cycle to bring projects from conceptualization to actual development, occupancy, CO. So it's a pretty, not something that changes overnight, if you will. But I'm happy to share the presentation and provide other updates as appropriate.
Okay, thank you for doing that. And yeah, we'll get a copy of tonight's presentation from you, and I'll make sure we get it distributed. Thank you, Mr. Testani. Mr. Mottola.
Hey, Mark, thanks for the presentation. The only question I had is, did you say for the Xi battery site, the Penske Auto Group is going to use part of that area?
The information I have from ownership is the entire property has been ground leased to the Penske Auto Group to relocate the Porsche dealership. They'll be building a new dealership showroom. They're landlocked where they are on Commerce Drive, understood that they need to make some improvements there. Wasn't necessarily the outcome that I was looking for, but that again highlights some of the limitations that we have when we don't actually own or control these sites.
Yeah. Did I heard, and this just could be, rumor, that's Fairfield has that at times, that I thought what was supposed to go there was a mixed residential condos and some storage in the back, but they pulled out because they were concerned about the UI poles in the back. Is that true, or is that just?
Well, there definitely there was a pre-application review for a mixed-use concept for the site, which included a component of self-storage, which is its own story. Not that there isn't market demand for self-storage. It's just a question of how much and where it should be located on a site like this with post-road frontage. The ownership did indicate that there was concern about the UI poles and that impact to that development. I leave it. I'm not sure how much I want to put credence to that. That was what was represented to me, but I think there are other factors certainly at play.
Sure, fair enough. No, I appreciate your answer very much. So that's all I have. Thank you, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other questions? Mr. Stark.
Yeah. Any update on the old Volkswagen dealership on Kings Highway?
Yeah, we've been working with the folks there. There are a couple issues for that site. They're trying to thread the needle between the fact that it is within a floodway, and so there are limitations in terms of bringing fill into the area. But it also is a brownfield site. The most likely remedial strategy for that site is to cap it. So would involve the placement of some fill to create the engineered control system. And so they've been working with DEP and to a lesser extent town bodies to again find the happy medium between the two. So we're not displacing floodplain, but at the same time we're remediating the site to make it not just suitable for future development or redevelopment, but also protective of human health and the environment. So that work is ongoing. We continue to have discussions with the development group, and hopefully we'll bring something in the near future.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Mr. Curley, you had a question?
Yeah, real quickly, and I recognize my video is sketchy, but I appreciate it. And yes, thank you for the presentation, Mark. This has been great. You did mention that the property across from the Hi-Ho Hotel Hi-Ho has been stalled. That is in my neighborhood, and I do get a lot of questions from neighbors in the area. Can you elaborate on that at all? It does seem like there's been very little work done on that property for quite some time.
Yeah, it's moving, but at a very slow pace. We have a couple projects like that where they're not moving as quickly as others. So it is an active site. I've talked to the building official and ownership relative to that. We're anticipating that coming online towards the end of this year, 2024, so fourth quarter, not earlier than that. But it is moving ahead, just not as quick as we would like.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Mottola.
Sorry, I forgot to ask this question. Mark, are you the Army site near Gould Manor, the building that's been vacant for a billion years, and this goes way back to Ken Flato's administration. And
yes,
what's going on with
I'm not directly involved in it. I have my own opinions on it. I think that I'm not sure who. I know Tom Bremer, the CAO, was working on it previously. I know he's no longer with the town, so I'm not sure how that who's working on the transfer of that property to the town. But I do think it's something that hopefully, again, it has been a long time. I do think that it would be helpful to have that as a town asset.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's something we maybe should address at some point during this year, and let the new administration get on their feet, and maybe we can address it at a future date. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Any other questions? Mr. Welsh.
How are you doing, Mark?
Good, Jim. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Has there been any thought in the town about, for the restaurants that use town property, like sidewalks for outdoor dining, which has been a very big success in the town? Like, why do we still charge rent when many communities do not do that around Fairfield County? Because most towns consider it to be economic development, because it helps the extra overflow in the restaurants, and it helps the restaurants, stay active and make money to pay the higher and higher rents and inflationary costs they have.
Well, that might be above my pay grade, but I would say that they're making use of town property, and so it's natural for the town to charge a fee for that. I do think that, and I've advocated that we need to keep those fees reasonable and be consistent in terms of the application of that across different restaurants. But there are only a handful that do pay that for using the town property, if you will. But I do agree with you that the outdoor dining is a significant benefit to the town, a real driver of vitality and economic activity downtown in particular. And that's why the commission, the Economic Development Commission, advocated for amending our zoning regulations to make it a lot easier for restaurants to establish outdoor dining facilities. We saw the impact that it had on the industry during COVID. We wanted to keep that because the public certainly enjoyed it as well.
And I agree, Mark. I think those were great changes that were made. But I think we should just explore that. Maybe we can talk to the first.
We'll certainly take that under advisement.
Yeah, because I mean, these restaurants are just under such stress with the rising of minimum wage, food prices going up, trying to keep prices low enough so that people will still come in their doors. And I'll tell you, in talking to many friends who live outside our community who come to Fairfield, it's one of the things that's most complimented, other than the beauty of our town, is, you know, how great it is that we have that downtown. We have the vitality that we have down in that downtown. And I just think that it's just something that should be looked into. I totally agree with, you know, many of these other towns that do this do require and should require, you know, of them to provide insurance. So if something happened on our property, we were indemnified. And all that stuff is, you know, great. But I just think that for the de minimis amount of money it brings in, to be quite honest with you, for the town on those rentals when I see them, I mean, it's really a de minimis amount.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't even be a blip on our radar. And I doubt it would even change the mill rate at all. But I'll do the calculation this budget season. But it just seems odd to me that we just wouldn't want to do that. So
I agree with you that Fairfield has become quite the dining destination, and the restaurants themselves do a lot in terms of, you know, creating that vital environment downtown. So it's something we want to foster as best we can.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mark. And thanks for the analysis tonight. It's one of the, I thought it was a great job, one of the best jobs. So thank you for that thorough analysis.
Thank you.
Laura, you're muted.
Laura, you're muted.
Sorry. One more thank you to Mark. Appreciate you being here. Sorry you had to wait so long. We look forward to, and I'll be in touch. We'll look forward to seeing what the best way is to get any updates on material items going forward until we see you again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Good night.
Bye.
All right. So is Bill Hurley here?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see your face, but I hear you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I hope you're feeling better.
Oh, word gets out. Yeah, I'm a little under the weather, but these topics are important to me in the town. So I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
This is for a duck farm, right?
Yeah. So, well, there's two items on the agenda. So we have for you item 7 and item 8. So unless anybody wants to switch the order. So item 7, let me introduce that item. That's to hear a presentation on Rooster River from Bill Hurley. And just as a reminder to this board, the topic of Rooster River flood mitigation came up during our ARPA discussion when we reviewed the status of ARPA spending. I think the town had allocated, I'm going from memory, roughly $3 million of ARPA money to that project, and we were looking for an update on the status of that spending, as well as an understanding of the future, what the future phases of that project would entail and how that would affect the overall capital plan. During the last meeting, I don't know if it was you, Mr. Hurley, or Mr. Schmidt mentioned that a presentation had been given to a neighborhood group, that there were, beyond this first phase of the project that would be covered by ARPA money, I think there were 6 or 7 additional phases. And many of us were not familiar with that in terms of kind of looking at the capital plans that we've seen. So we just wanted to get a little bit better understanding of that. For the board members, the presentation or the materials that are that were posted, there are supplemental materials that were posted, and those consist of the presentation that was originally given to those neighbors. So back in September. So Bill, I don't know, I don't think you have to go through this page by page, but maybe you just want to hit the highlights and kind of explain what this broader effort looks like around Rooster River for the board and how it might relate to our capital plan now or in the future.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mega, who's in attendance. Maybe if you can share the presentation and go to slide 2.
Can you see everybody?
Yes.
All right, now we can. All right. So in your, we did revise this just a little bit from what we had sent you before. No, you had it right. You had it right before.
Okay.
Okay, there, that one. Yeah, I'm sorry, that one. And just real quick was the ARPA was 3.2 million, and we applied for permits. The early permits were 2022, and we still haven't gotten the Army Corps of Engineer permit approval yet. So that's the status on that. And the in 2024, I'll be presenting, and it was included in your packet, the $2.5 million bond for Rooster River for the State Urban Action Grant. Representative McCarthy Vahey was able to secure some additional funding for the town. We have gotten the engineering applied for the application. We got the approval, and so it will go before the Board of Selectmen in late January and the Board of Finance and RTM in February.
And Bill, can you just quickly explain what phase 2 is versus phase 1 for everyone?
Well, actually, we have a slide for that. Let me see which one that was.
I'm going to pull that up.
Yeah.
My voice is like all over the place. Here. So this is page 2.
Well, we had another. Okay. Phase 1 is basically the detention areas. You might have heard in the past that Tunxus Hill Park was one. There is also Fairchild Wheeler. That's going to be the most bang for the buck detention area. We're investigating Owen Fish, but we're having some issues getting a quality detention there. And the other spot was Villa Avenue. We might recall the open space that was purchased, 150 Villa Avenue. We actually were able to obtain another a sliver of property in Algonquin. So right here is the phase 2 Villa Avenue. And this would help relieve flooding relief to Algonquin Road. So that would be phase 2. And phase 3.
Okay.
Slide 24, I think. Yeah. Phase 3 is that one is I'm having trouble reading it. I apologize.
Okay, so that
it's basically it's dredging from Brooklawn Avenue to North Avenue or Kings Highway.
Yes.
We still have to do a survey for that to get the final determination, but we were estimating from some quick cross sections that our survey team that we have here in Fairfield, and we estimated that it would require about a foot or two of excavation to restore the riverbed back to its original elevations. The town does not own the river, but I don't think it's ever been dredged. And they had done the dike project, I think, in the 1960s. So just to give you an update on that.
Is this,
we did.
is this phase in the capital plan, Bill, right now?
Well, it's all it should be included. We have it all as part of the thing, and that's where the breakdown is. Let me see. I'll have to get back to you on that with Sabrina on that. Let me see if I can get something really quick here.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't have to answer it all tonight. I think the relevant thing for the board is, understanding the timing of these phases, the costs, and if and how they're reflected in the capital plan. So,
well, actually, on this one, we have because we didn't know at the last quarterly meeting. I mean, we knew about how much it was going to be, 2.5. I believe it is on the capital plan now that I recall. It's just under 2.5. It's 2.5 million. I think it says state bonding, Aroostook River. But we'll get it on there. We have a breakdown of the funding and what's entailed. If you go to slide 31.
Okay, just hold on.
Sure.
Yep. My voice is echoing. I don't know why.
So the 6.7 million grant total, that does include our 320,000 capital non-recurring fund as well.
This is what the breakdown is. I'm sorry, this voice is really not helping me. But Bill, if you want to go over this breakdown for the funding and how much we have left.
Sure. Yeah. The capital, the funding, the non-recurring capital, that was for design, 320. We do know that we're going to need more money for the design. The consultant has gone back and forth getting these permits with Army Corps and the Deep, Connecticut Deep. They also have done 2 designs already for Owen Fish, and there's going to have to be a revised design at a chamber that eventually is located near Tunx's Hill Park. So we know we're and there's also some permit conditions. When we get the permits, we'll have a better idea. The 3.2 million was ARPA. We do have a Bridgeport share of 750,000 for the Fairchild Wheeler golf course. Some of you might not know that the golf course is owned by Bridgeport, but it is located in the town of Fairfield. And then we have included, I'm assuming that we will get the approvals from the town, the 2.5 million for the urban grant. So then if you go to the next slide.
So we have expenditures for cost estimates for this one, how much we have spent.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, Bill, but I don't know if anybody else, but when Mega speaks, there's a very significant reverberation.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to understand. I'm not sure, Meg, if you're how you're doing your audio, and if you've both called in and if you have it on your computer, but.
You want to sit here?
I talk.
Yeah, maybe, Bill, to the extent you can.
Stay muted.
Go through it.
Try, see if they hear
Yeah,
you.
why don't you come sit here?
If they hear you, if you say.
There we go. Should work.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so that's better, right?
Much better.
Yeah. Now, these are the current expenditures to date. But as I said before, we have 700,000 expend We have roughly $6 million left of funding available. But if we go to the next slide, Mega.
Yes. So you want to do the cost estimate from 2019 to 2022? Bill, this one?
Yeah, the consultant has given us cost estimates from 2019 to 2022. They have not given us an updated cost estimate because they're waiting for the final approval, and then they will give us the final cost estimate. We're hoping to get the final approvals, permit approvals, in February, and then get the cost estimate probably sometime in March, and the final design, and then we would go out to bid.
Bill, and I don't want to interrupt.
Sure.
I'm not sure about the rest of the board. It's probably a little bit hard to follow without the capital plan, but just stepping back from this, the multiple phases of this project, have all the phases been, do they have a cost estimate attached to all of them versus the grant funding we've secured thus far?
They actually
last meeting.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think Mr. Walsh, raised it too, was that, we had this ARPA project going on, but it was only sort of the first stab at this, at all the flooding issues there around Rooster River. So I think what we were trying to understand is what is the broader scope of the project and what's been secured as funding so far. And then is the remainder of that actually reflected in the long-term capital plan?
It should be. I will double check that tomorrow. Why not? Or maybe 2 days from now.
Okay.
Or actually, Mega can maybe check with Sabrina. But with the ARPA, it was $3.2 million, as we mentioned before, and we're getting the $2.5 million from Bridgeport. And so, basically, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this. We have the funding here at $6.7 million. So that we have, and we'll make sure that's on the capital. But because it involves, like you said, 3 phases, we'll have the three phases separated on the capital plan if it's not already. And then go from there. As I said, right now it does balance with the expenditures and the funding that we have, but we honestly don't know what the final costs are going to be yet until we get the final cost estimates.
Mr. Mottola?
Just summing it up, Bill. You're going to know the cost estimates this March, you think. There's going to be some more costs associated with this project. We have $6 million and change of funds right now to cover what we have done and will continue to do, but it's going to cost some more. But do you anticipate for these additional costs, we're going to get some more grant monies from the state or other sources, or do you just not know yet?
We don't know yet. For example, when we talked about phase 3, the dredging, all right, we plan on using $1 million to $1.5 million of that bond money for that dredging or the soil removal. Now we're doing the work, but it's also shared by Bridgeport. So we have had discussions with Bridgeport. Nothing's been finalized yet. They have potential for getting grant money as well. And so that's one of those where we don't really know if they participate, then we could get more money from them. Is there more state money available? That's another thing that we're going to check as well.
Okay. So we just don't know yet. That's the
No,
that's the answer.
unfortunately, we don't know. And so, and like you heard, even from other presentations too, one of the sites, Tunx's Hill has undesirable soil. It's not hazardous, but unfortunately, it has to require a soil management plan, environmental, and we have to take the soil off site. So that's an additional cost. We have some of that figured in, but I honestly don't know how much that will be until we get the final estimate.
And I guess we'll check tomorrow or the next day to see if there's some type of a placeholder on the capital plan. Just I don't remember if there.
Yeah, we'll make sure. And my apologies I misunderstood. We'll make sure it's on the waterfall so that you can follow it through. I honestly thought that this was better, and I apologize where it showed each phase and how we have the funding and how we have what we plan to expend it on. But we'll do it on the waterfall chart.
Yeah, I just think, and Lori, Charlton, correct me if I'm wrong, we just kind of want to see where this fits in the big, the big plans going forward and so on and so forth, and what our exposure is going to be in the coming years. So I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, that's, and I think that's right. If this is going to be a priority for the administration, I think, Bill, want to make sure that there's nothing major missing from that capital plan. And, as we talked about this during the ARPA discussion, it just wasn't clear to what extent we had, reflected that over time. So we can get a better update on this when we see the updated capital plan.
Yeah.
We're not, and hey, Ms. Charles, there's no risk that we're not going to not be able to use the ARPA money for this project by the time we have to use that money. Is that a fair statement?
I can't answer that. Bill, do you want to address that?
Oh, that was the bill.
As I said, we're expecting the permits. We've been really forcing it and have even some members of the state delegation kind of discussing it with Army Corps, saying that, we have 3,000 people that got flooded. We really need you to work on this. I know Army Corps is understaffed. The one lady, I think, said 69 permits a day or something like that that she has to review. And so we're trying to move along with them on that.
Okay, and that's the end of this 2024. We have to have that money at least.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. As I said, I'm a little. So anyway, we expect the permits by February, and then we would final design would probably be March, and then we would put it out to bid in April. So even if we put the thing out to bid in, for some reason, July, we're all you have for the ARPA money, you have to make sure it's at least encumbered. And then you have 2 years to construct it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Just have a question. Just to reflect that we are still in phase one. All this money that has been used as just in phase one only for detention systems of Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course and Tunx's Hill Park. Phase two, which is Villa Avenue, is just that little bit of that 150 Villa Avenue. We purchased a property and we received an estimate, which we have to go over. That's phase two. So when you want to look at the breakdown, you want to look like each breakdown. We have phase one and phase two, but for phase three, it will be like a cost estimate, because that won't be that will be an estimate. So is that okay if you want to see the estimate cost for phase three? We have phase one and phase two. So just want to make clear when you want to see the breakdown in the waterfall chart.
Yeah, I think when we get the update on the capital plan, to the extent that these, these are activities that are going to fall into the timeline of that plan, then yes, we would want to see the estimates included in there.
And just on, we did have one of the slides did kind of show you a schedule, but like the Villa Avenue, just to let you know, if you didn't know, Villa Avenue, we did receive inland wetland permit approval.
Yes.
They have they wanted us to do a little bit more of a detailed landscaping and wetland plantings plan. So we'll be working with conservation and another organization, and we'll be able to start that project in the spring, and then do most of the work during the summer. So that's the phase 2. So phase 1, we're really just waiting for permits.
Yes.
Phase 2, as I said, we can start that in the spring and summer, and phase 3.
That should start next time.
I'm going too fast for you, Meg. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at my phase 3 slide. So phase 3 will be 2024. We are expecting spring 2024. We are expecting to complete the bathymetric survey, and summer and fall 2024 we should be completion of dredging. Because that's
actually that's a big difference though, and we have to find that out.
Yes.
On whether we need permits. If we need permits, we're going to have to move that a year ahead.
A year and a half,
So,
and also the
yeah.
cost share with Bridgeport that is pending as well for
Right.
bathymetric surveying. So there are 2 unknowns over there. The permits is an unknown, and the cost share is completely unknown for us. I think the last slide that Bill shared was around 1.5 million that was estimated. It still remains as 1.5 because we don't know how much we will have to spend depending on the cost share and bathymetric surveying and dredging. That is unknown for phase 3. For phase 1 and phase 2, we know what is anticipated.
Yeah.
Phase 3 is kind of
Okay.
I now have a clear understanding, Lori. We'll give you phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and a future phase 4 if it's necessary. And we'll put it on the capital, and we'll list it as phases, and then we'll say what the project is, or if it's a combination of projects. Like phase 1 would be detention areas. We don't have to list each one. It'll be a group, and we'll do it that way, and then we'll have them. Most of them are going to be, because we were using the ARPA. The phase 1 is definitely in, as you know already, in this, in the capital plan, and so is phase 2. Phase 3, as I said, once the bond gets approved, we'll get that phase 3 and 4. We'll get it for you, definitely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anybody have questions on this? I know we still have some items to get through on this agenda. So does anybody? It seems like we're going to have to follow up on this again when we get the capital planning update, but it also sounds like these multiple phases of this are going to come at us pretty quick. So this was helpful. Does anyone have questions? I can't see everyone. Bill, do you mind taking the presentation down?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Omega. I mean,
okay,
Lori, you'd said something, but I just, what did you just say? I'm sorry, because it was partially correct, but
no, I just said it sounds like these multiple phases are going to be happening, in the short term over the next,
oh yeah,
1 to 3
I got
years.
it.
So yeah, so we'll follow up on this again when we.
Yeah, we'll do that, and then hopefully by, as I say, early spring, we'll have the updated cost estimates too, and then we can fine tune those numbers for the capital plan. Yes.
Okay.
Does any board members have questions on this? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, and look forward to the follow-up. So we're gonna, if everybody's all set on this, we can move to item 8. All right. So item 8 is to here consider and act upon a resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen, amending and restating a resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating $3,729,800 for the costs associated with the replacement of the Duck Farm Road Bridge, authorizing grants to reimburse $2,983,840 of such appropriation, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance a portion of such appropriation. To increase the appropriation to $3,819,176, increase the grant authorization to $302,341, and increase the bond authorization to $795,835. So the full resolution for this item is included in the backup materials. It was previously approved by the Board of Selectmen and requires approval from the RTM. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Mottola. So the materials for this item begin on page 27 of the PDF. The full resolution is included there. And page 32 provides an explanation of how much of the increased authorization will be absorbed by the town after grants and other reimbursements. And then the financial summary is on page 33. Mr. Hurley, highlights on this?
Sure. The proposed revised resolution is to match the final project authorization letter agreement. It involves involves the increase in project costs, which was $89,000, an increase in grant funding, $39,000, and an increase in the town share funding of $49,875. But it does not include credits such as the Aquarian reimbursement of $40,000 and any other minor or moderate project adjustments. Overall, the additional town share costs are anticipated below $10,000 and could even go lower pending unused extra work components or final audits, which would be completed in a couple of years. The final or the revised agreement has included all construction phase costs and has already been approved by the state and federal government for any adjustments related to the project. And they are eligible for 80% reimbursement, with the exception of the water company utility work. The original resolution was based on the consulting engineer and DOT's estimate for the project, and a preliminary project authorization was used to obtain funding so the project could go out to bid. The proposed resolution, or the final resolution, and the project authorization are necessarily based on the additional project costs and the grant money provided to the town. These agreements are based on final and closeout documents from the project, and as I mentioned before, and have been approved by the Connecticut DOT and Federal Bridge Program.
All right. So the bottom line of this is the net increased cost to the town is less than, you said less than $10,000, and the project is completed?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Questions from the board? Okay. I see none. So we can take this item to a vote. All in favor of approving the resolution I'm sorry, that's item 8, right? Referenced in item 8 of the agenda and set forth in full in the meeting materials, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Curley, can I have a voice vote? Okay. I think it is unanimous.
Yep, I'm here, and I agree.
Ms. Charlton, it's item 7 on the agenda, just to clarify.
Okay, sorry about that. Item 7.
That's all right.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. Okay, so we can move on to item 8. But before we do, thank you, Mr. Hurley. Thank you, Mega. Bill, I hope you feel better.
Yeah, Bill, feel better.
Thanks. I will get you that information for sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for being.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you have a home.
All right, so item 8 is to hear, consider, and act upon the draft minutes of November 16th, 2023, November 21st, 2023, and December 5th, 2023. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Testani, seconded by Mr. Walsh. Okay. So the draft minutes begin on page 35 of the posted meeting materials. The first 2 sets of minutes are from meetings prior to the December organizational meeting, so we'll vote on those first. And then we'll vote separately on the December 5th minutes after we get any comments. So are there any comments on the November 16th or 21st minutes? Anyone? Okay. I just have 2 minor items, so I'd like to make a motion to correct these in the November 21st minutes. Under item 8, there just needs to be a slash between 2022 and 2023 in the first sentence. And then under item 13 in the last sentence, the reference should be to the February 24th meeting for Matt Spurndle, not the January meeting. Any comments, discussion? Okay, can I have a second on that motion? Mr. Testani, all in favor of that amendment, those amendments? Okay. Opposed? Abstain? Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, so that amendment passes 801. Okay, so all in favor of in favor, sorry, are there anything on November 21st, just before we vote? Okay. All right, so all in favor of approving the amended minutes of November 16th and November 21, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, those minutes are approved 801. Okay. All right, so let's move to the December 5th minutes. Any comments on these minutes? Okay, I just have a couple quick things. On item 13, it says, this is just for Prue, just wording. So it says certain board members were disappointed that Mr. Brimmer was not in attendance and requested he attend the next meeting to answer questions above and give any other updates. Mr. Testani was not among the disappointed board members, and it should say, and raised an objection regarding to the extent to which the matter was discussed. That is what we said during the meeting. And then the second part of my motion is just to add a notation next to the vote that Sheila Marmion was not present for this vote. Can I have a second on that?
Thank you, Larry.
Mr. Testani, okay. Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. It is unanimous. And then all in favor of approving the amended minutes of December 5th, 2023, please raise your hand, say aye.
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 Okay, great. It is unanimous 9-0. Okay, so item 9. Mary, I'm sorry. Did you have something? You're muted. You're muted, Mary. Oh, wait, did you abstain? Yes. All right, so sorry. So can you unmute?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I wanted to abstain from the minutes.
Okay, so proof for the record, the December 5th would be 801 with Mary LeClaire abstaining. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we'll move to item 9 to hear committee updates. So first, I just want to thank those board members who volunteered to serve on committees and let everyone know the committee composition for 2024. So the audit committee will stay the same. Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Ms. Leclerc. Budget committee, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Stark, Mr. Testani. Senior and disabled tax relief, Mr. Mottola, Mr. Curley. Mr. Walsh, I wasn't sure about you. Are you serving on that committee?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. Okay.
Definitely not.
Mr.
I spent
Mottola?
hundreds of hours on it the last time, and somebody else having to pick up the ball. And any further expansion of that program, to be quite honest with you, is probably going to have to come out of the education system. So I will not serve on that committee at all.
So senior and disabled tax relief is Mr. Mottola and Mr. Curley. Fund balance committee, Mr. Curley, Ms. Charlton, Ms. Ruggiero. Just also want to let the board know we did not have anyone step up to volunteer for the purchasing policy committee. And as a result, the action items on the purchasing policy will include updates to the full board on implementation, training, and any required changes. So that'll be managed by the administration and be brought forth to the full board for discussion and approval. I do know that the administration has met internally. I communicated with the purchasing director, so they've met internally to discuss next steps. The purchasing director, the first selectman, the town attorney, and also our former colleague, Chris DeWitt, who's part of the first selectman's transition team. He was also involved in those discussions. And they will be coming back to this board over the next, I would say, 2 months to talk to us about next steps going forward and to begin the process of reporting to this board the items that we had put in the policy that will require quarterly reporting. So does anybody have any questions about that? Okay.
Ms. Charlton?
Yes.
Would it be possible to get each of the committees to send the entire board their schedule of their meetings? So, because some of them I might want to attend. So
Sure.
I just think it'd be proper if we share it with our own board members.
Yes, obviously committee meetings should be publicly noticed and available. And I will ask Jen Carpenter when she does that to copy the board on those notifications. Thank you for suggesting.
Thank you.
Okay, item 10. To hear, consider, and act on any communications. Ms. Marmion.
Yes, thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to let the board know that I am resigning my position on the board effective tomorrow.
Sad.
It's been such a pleasure to be a
Thanks for
member.
talking, Sheila. We appreciate. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Jack. But I've really enjoyed it. I feel so privileged to have worked with all of you over the years, and I'm sad to go, but it's time for me to go. I've got a lot of work commitments and other things going on, and I'll miss you all, but I do actually enjoy watching Board of Selectmen meetings and now Board of Finance meetings on FairTV. So I wish everyone the best, and I know you're in such great hands. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody, and I'll see you on FairTV.
Oh, well, thank you, Sheila. We'll hopefully you can make it to the next meeting in February and we can honor you properly for your service. But
we'll see about that, Lori. I'm not sure.
I think you should at least get a plaque, Sheila.
You got to come back for the plaque, Sheila, if not for...
Not if it's at 10:30 at night, Lori. Sorry.
All right. We'll put the plaque at the beginning of the agenda. How's that?
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, Sheila. It's been I'll open it up to the board if anybody wants to comment, but thank you for your service to the town, not only on this board, but as a selectman, as an RTM member, and for everything that you've done. It's really been great having you as a colleague, and we will miss you equally.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Okay, I don't know if there's anything else. A quick note to the board. I want the board to know that, or just if you missed it, everyone on the board was emailed a copy of the town's fiscal 23 annual comprehensive financial report, known as the ACFR instead of the CAFR. And the federal and state single audit reports. For reference to the public, those documents are the town's audited financial statements. And they will be posted and reviewed with the board at one of our February meetings. We are not sure which one. We're trying to confirm Mr. Santafanti's availability. Do any committee members want to give any updates on anything, or anyone else have comments?
Miss, can we, before we go there, Miss Charlton,
Yep.
are we going to be getting a hard copy of the former CAFR?
Sure. I can ask Mr. Santafanti to get those to us. Actually, let me make a note to myself, and I'll ask Jen Carpenter if she can arrange that.
It's just traditional. It's easier to make notes on it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I also like to keep a copy from year to year to compare them.
Yeah.
I think Miss Fossey
Lori,
has her
I
hand
have
up.
all the hard copies.
Okay. Oh, you have them for the whole board, Caitlin?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Appreciate that.
They just got actually delivered today, so.
Ah, how timely. All right. Any other committees, members want to give an update? John, I don't know if you have anything. Craig?
I think our next meeting for the audit's going to be January 24th, I believe.
Lori, it's Craig. My video is.
Your video's not there and your voice just cut out.
Your voice is gone too.
Okay.
You got to get some more of the hamsters and the wheels to power up the internet for you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm not sure what's going on with my video. So on the senior disabled tax relief, there was some email traffic about from our tax collector who wanted to have some small, relatively minor changes made prior to this upcoming tax cycle. So in an effort to try and get that done prior to our budget season, we're going to meet with him next week. And following that, we'll have some back and forth with the RTM to get this through. But I imagine that if all goes to plan, we'll have something to discuss with the full board at our next meeting, and we'll take action before the budget season starts.
Okay, thank you for that update. Caitlin, do you have anything for us? No? Mr. Gerber, do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, I take a motion to adjourn then. Mr. Stark, seconded by Mr. Mottola.
Hopefully you heard that.
All in favor?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for staying.